Trella Marie Barnheisel Anderson was born December 13th, 1904 in Indiana. She is shown here on a visit to Indiana years later, standing near her favorite creek on the farm where she was born, posed with her parents, Charles Wesley Barnheisel and Ruth Anna Morgan Barnheisel. Trella and Arvil Franklin Anderson celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary in 1969. In the background is their wedding portrait, taken December 25th, 1924. Their children were Arvil Franklin Jr., Charles Thomas, Nada Ann, Philip Preston, Martha Sue, David Byron, John Leroy, James Arden, Paul Edward, and Daniel Bean. Trella Anderson was interviewed September 23, 1990, at her home in Independence, Kansas. Are you ready?
Ready as I know how to be.
Tell me how you came to pick this house.
When I was first left alone and knew that I had to have a home to live in, I wanted a place of my own. So I asked Arlene to help me. And she contacted some real estate agents. And there were various things about various houses that I liked and I didn't like. But when we come to this one and asked questions about it, I was told that it had been a parsonage. Well, after several years of living in a parsonage, I felt that had to be my house. So I decided to take it. And when I asked the price of it, they said they wanted a little more than what I wanted to give. But because they knew me and they'd known my husband, said, let her have it.
And so you take it. What does this house mean to you after all this time? What does it mean to you now, the house?
It means that it's my home. Of this 20 years that I've been in this house has endeared it to my heart. And I feel that anybody that knows me recognizes this as my home.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your earlier homes, though, when you were a little girl back in Indiana.
Well, back in Indiana, we lived on a farm, and the first house that we lived in that I can remember had an upstairs, and there's where I spent my first Christmas. My sister was just a little baby that I can remember, but there's not much else about the house that I remember.
Tell me about the people in the house.
Well, there was my father and my mother and my baby sister who cried a lot, and me, of course.
Tell me about your father.
Well, my father was a religious type man. He was active in the church. He liked to be involved in music. He liked music and sang with groups wherever we could. And of course, the thing that I remember so vividly is when he held me up. Now, that wasn't in the first house that we lived in. That was in the second house. And he held me up and pointed out Haley's Comet to me.
And how old were you? You know?
I don't remember. You'd have to hunt up Haley's Comet and find out how long ago that's been.
He was a very handsome man, wasn't he?
Well, he was a good-looking man. Of course, he had a mustache that my mother didn't like. He always had to wring it out after he drank coffee.
And your mother was a dressmaker, is that right?
My mother was a dressmaker, considered one of the best in northern Indiana. And if there's anything special to be made, somebody had a special occasion, weddings and things like that, my mother was the one that was called on to do the sewing.
And now, tell me about your mother and father had a problem in their marriage, right? And they separated.
Yes, they did. I think mostly because of their differences in, well, what is the word I want to use? My father was from a German-speaking family and of a different background from what my mother was. My mother's people were hard-working people. They believed in whatever they did to do it right. My father worked hard, but I think he disliked the farm very much because his brother got to take a business course and worked in a bank, which put him in a class where he wore nice clothes. My father worked a lot in the barnyard and smelled of cow manure.
So the farm really wasn't something he was happy with, and
I don't feel that he was happy with it, but I feel that it was the only thing that he felt that he could do without stirring up trouble in the family.
And now you last saw your father. How old were you then?
I was in my early teens. The last time I saw my father, I saw him walk away, and I never saw him again.
But now we've found some recent records, haven't we?
Yes, we have, and it's so pleasing, so satisfying to me, except for the fact I can't share it with my sister.
Yes, your sister died. Tell me, now I know that the family in Indiana is a very close-knit group, very interested in family history and so on. Now you have your family record back here with all the pictures on it and so on. And why don't you tell me about the drawing that Randy made?
What?
The drawing of the church. The church that the family built. You remember back in Indiana?
Well, of course, that church was built before I was born. But the thing that impresses me so much about that church is the fact that both my father's people and my mother's people, where they settled, they built a church. They homesteaded, and those churches are standing today.
Yeah, very good. I remember when we went back to Indiana, you did a little recitation for me in the church. Can you remember that? Can you do it again?
They say the master's coming to visit the town today. No one can tell what house or home the master will choose to stay. I thought, as my heart beat wildly, what if he should come to mine? How I would strive to entertain and honor that guest divine. So straight I turned to toiling to make my home more neat. I swept and polished and garnished and decked it with blossoms sweet. But right in the midst of my duties, a woman came to my door. She'd come to tell me her troubles and my comfort and help to implore. But I said, I cannot stop nor listen to you today. I have greater things to attend to. And the woman went away. Soon there came another, a beggar, thin, pale, and weak, and said, let me rest a while in your home I seek. I have traveled far since morning, and I'm hungry and faint and weak. My heart was sore with longing, comfort and health I seek.
You're fabulous. That you learned that years and years ago, and you still remember all that. I can't do that.
My mother always had me learning pieces to say on any occasion, mostly church occasions. And of course, there were some that rhymed a little more than others, so they were easier to remember. But this one, I don't know. I can remember standing there in the church and saying them. There were other pieces that I learned to say. And I always had one for Mother's Day, Children's Day, any special occasion.
And you like to write poetry, don't you? You like to write poetry.
Yes, I did. But now I don't remember my poetry like I remember the other fellows writing for me to say. Let's see, is there one that I can remember?
Well, tell me, this good-looking fella came along by the name of Orville Franklin Anderson. You remember him?
Yes, I remember him very well. Now, that was something else in my life that I think the good Lord had a plan in it. I was in Sunday school a class of girls, and the Sunday school teacher wanted us to wanted us to tell about different denominations and how they got started. Well, of course, I'd been raised a Methodist and still didn't know too much about it. But other girls, they took Methodists and different denominations. But there were some denominations that weren't taken, like the Baptists. And so they told me, wanted to know if I would try to find out something about the Baptists. Well, somebody come along with the idea of contacting William Jewell College and maybe getting some information that way. So I was given a name from William Jewell College. I don't remember just how it came about, but this young ministerial student was had been he was a Methodist by being in a Methodist community, but he wanted to go into the Baptist ministry because he understood that the Baptists were a little easier to get along with. So he had entered William Jewell College to become a Baptist minister. And so that put him in contact with both Methodist and Baptist. Well, I was raised up in a Methodist community. My mother was a Methodist. Her father was a Methodist minister. And so I was attracted to this young preacher that knew what Methodists were as well as becoming a Baptist. So we got started corresponding, and he would answer my questions, and then we would share little things that we knew about. So finally, after a year or two of correspondence, he decided to come to Indiana and see what I looked like. So he did, and we liked each other. And before he left, he asked me to marry him.
Where were you when he asked you to marry him?
Huh?
Where were you when he asked you to marry him? You remember where you were?
Well, when we actually met?
No, when he asked you to marry him?
Yes, I remember. It was down in front of the railroad station. He was waiting for the train to go back to Missouri, to college. And we had had a lot of good communication. And I think we both knew about as much about each other as was possible. So there's where he asked me. So on Christmas Day at noon, that coming Christmas, we were married.
He was a very hard-working young man, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Of course, he had been raised on a farm. He knew what labor was. He hadn't finished high school at the time that he planned to go into the ministry because, well, there'd been a job opened up on the railroad, where they work on the railroad track. And he had section hand. And his folks thought that at his age, he was doing very good to be able to land a job like that. And he didn't need more education for that. But when this thing of becoming a minister come along, he had to have more education. Of course, he had to finish his high school as well as go on to college, which he did, and was proud of it.
He worked a lot with the harvest crews. I remember you told me years ago.
Yes, he, being in a rural community, he worked with harvest hands, traveled around with them too a lot.
And was an only son?
He was an only son that lived. Now they lost two boys as very small children, and he had three sisters.
Well, tell me what your thoughts were about as a young woman becoming the wife of a minister, and whether you thought it was going to be the kind of life that you wanted to live.
Well, I thought it was going to be a dignified life. Of course, I'd always been active in the church. My mother never allowed my sister or I to miss church unless we had some reason like being sick or something that way. We always had to be in church on Sunday. We never did anything on Sunday that was called labor, like, well, now my mother's a dressmaker. She didn't thread a needle on Sunday. But we were raised very strict that way. So I knew that church activities required to be a very special person.
Yes. And he was a very special person to join your life too, wasn't he?
Oh, I don't know, we harmonized very well and all the things that we thought and did.
I think he'd be very happy if he knew you had this house.
Well, I think he would too. And I know that I feel as well as I say, the Lord's here.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about your marriage. Now you had how many children? You had how many children? Count them.
Let's see, we had 11, wasn't it?
11. Okay. And now I don't think we'll run through them all, but you had one child that died, Nada Ann.
One child that died in infancy, and then of course lost an adult son.
Yeah, Tom. Right. Your children have done a lot of things, and they've I think done a lot of varied things, but a lot of a thread of newspaper work ran through it, didn't it, for a lot of them?
Yes, that newspaper thing was something that just kind of seemed to, well, get started through my husband. He started working on the college paper as an odd job. He learned. Now, he didn't learn linotype or anything like that, but he did learn the handset type, which was a great help to him in later years as he had little printing jobs to do in his church work. And he got a little hand press and could do his own thing.
And then there was the little weekly newspaper, the Columbia County Journal, that a number of the family worked on?
Well, the Columbia County Journal was one of those things. Seems as though the boys picked up this printing thing from their father's activities, and then the older boys started working on various newspapers. Well, they picked it up in school too. So the time come when we felt that a family newspaper would be an activity that would tie the family together. So the older boys and younger boys worked together, and
Martha Sue too.
Martha Sue and even their mother run a linotype for a couple of years.
That's right. You were a good printer.
Hunt and peck.
Well, you got it out, and that's all it can. I know that much of the growing up years for your children was in the Depression, and it was tough. What do you think helped you get through all that?
Well, sometimes I think just that little thing called need. If we needed it, we got at it and done it. And they weren't, my children weren't kids that stopped because they thought it was going to be hard.
You were a pretty persistent and rather talented too, because you were able to sew and to cook and do all these things.
Well, you go back to this time back there the background, my background, were the family, when they needed something, had to do something, they done it.
Yeah. Well, very good. Now, of course, everybody grew up and moved away and everything, and now here you are coming down toward the sunset. I know you're having some health problems. And, what are your thoughts now?
Well, I don't let anything scare me. I am proud of a lot of the accomplishments, proud of having my arms around these darling children, and the part that I hope I've played in their lives. I do miss not being closer to them because we are miles apart and sometimes miles in our thoughts. But I don't think I've got anything to really be ashamed of as far as any of their mistakes.
That's true. It's kind of, as you said to me a little earlier, it's getting later, and I think we know that. Are you afraid?
Am I afraid?
Are you afraid?
Now, how do you mean?
About life ending, maybe?
Well, I am a Christian, and I know that the Lord has a place prepared for me. And I'm sure it's a wonderful place.
Yes.
Now, if I've just left enough anxiety with my children that they want to follow me there, I'm happy.
You're it all.